I'm gonna keep it short and blunt. I feel like aliens or some kind of spiritual beings contacted me. They told me to ask for anything. I immediately responded telepathically. Save everyone. Make it better here. Save us. And this was an extremely emotional moment. I felt reluctant acknowledgement from this being, and years later, I received similar communication that they had arrived here. A few nights ago, I got, "We tried our best, but they're too strong." I don't know if it's real or not, straight up. It is what it is. Just sharing. I fully acknowledge that this could all be in my head, but I generally don't know. These were extremely strange experiences, and I've had a lot of them in my life, prior to and in the midst of this. One being, I saw Hat Man in my room when I was 7, in the 90s. I screamed and pulled the blanket over my head, and then I had memory loss. My next memory is waking up in the morning, running to tell my parents what I saw. From my perspective, I could have been abducted. Or you just fucking have schizophrenia, dude. It might not be aliens, but it could still be supernatural. They could be thought forms. Reality as we perceive it is an illusion anyway. A ghost could float by without you ever seeing, so since reality is just one big vision quest, sometimes you bump into entities that you yourself could have created. Or they could be external beings. They could be spirit guides or higher dimensional versions of you. Who knows? It's real, and by it, I mean physical, tangible alien life forms, vastly more powerful than us. I am so tired of trying to warn the people I love, but for God's sake, fucking build a shelter, stockpile goods, and get ready to live for survival, rather than comfort. They are here. More are coming very soon, and they are not friendly. People think they want to see the evidence. I get so sick of seeing these hopeful, naive numbskulls over on Reddit and shit talk about how humanity is ready or that we're almost ready to learn. No. No the fuck you are not. I wish I hadn't learned. The problem is that people want sexy evidence like long, clear HD videos of ships in flight or maybe even a recording of a non-human speaking, but we only have a handful of the former and only one of the latter. And trust me, nobody wants to hear what it apparently said. We don't have any preserved alien corpses or whatever. We have a ton of radar and sonar blips, thousands of personal testimonies, but people just shrug at that. We have a few images of the aquatic structure, but nothing that some jaded hipsters won't laugh off as Photoshop. The real best evidence we have are thousands of images of corpses. Not just skinned and drained like the cattle mutilations, but contorted, warped, transformed into impossible concoctions of flesh and organs. Weird metallic devices plugged into open wounds and mouths. We have a video of a completely mangled, headless corpse found in the woods. Next to it was a brain and its attached eyes, resting on a 4-foot metallurgic tub of some goo. It had needle-like objects stuck into it that were automatically injecting the goo into the brain. The brain and eyes had no decomposition. An electroencephalography showed the brain was somehow still alive. We have no idea how long it was out there, or what, if anything, it was feeling or seeing. Do people seriously want us to put that on fucking 60 Minutes? We're ready for disclosure. You think anyone, will be able to keep it cool once they've seen it. Nobody keeps their cool once they've seen it. These things, whatever the fuck their motives, are fucking horrific, and every signal points towards an impending invasion. I can't emphasize this enough. We are detecting them every night now. Not one or two, dozens. Please, take it fucking seriously. How do you know this? Who are you? I'm going to assume you aren't literally asking me to identify myself, for obvious reasons. I work in intelligence. I've been working on this issue for less than 10 years, but more than a couple. I'm in a cohort of a relatively low level of compartmentalization, meaning I know more about the whole story than most do, but I don't know everything. That is reserved for a handful of scientists, mathematicians, and logicians who try to synthesize everything and refine a holistic theory of the phenomenon. I am primarily involved in data analysis regarding retrievals. I don't care to get more specific than that, or, about my job description. Feel free to ask questions if you want, but I can't guarantee I'll answer them. The most important message I have for you is build a good shelter, if at all possible, and stockpile goods, and start now. Not months from now when everyone starts doing it. I can't guarantee it'll save you, but it can only help your chances. Why aren't you afraid the post is here? Why would you even do it? How do you know what you're hearing is true? I'm not just hearing. I'm hearing and seeing, and most of it is not secondhand. I'd love to say I'm doing it entirely for altruistic reasons, and I truly believe that is part of it, but the biggest motivation is that I'm simply tired of keeping this shit to myself. Particularly given recent levels of activity, I can't carry this on my conscience anymore. Not trying to sound heroic in the slightest. If I were brave, I would do this publicly, and hope the supposed new whistleblower protections would actually keep me safe. But in some small way, it makes me feel better to share with people. Okay, 1. What do these things want? 2. Are they a species commonly referred to in communities like this? And 3. Should we just kill ourselves when they come? Number 1. No clue, and they don't seem interested in talking about it. But they have zero regard for any form of Earth life. Number 2. The popular image of the gray alien is pretty much accurate. We believe they are biosynthetic beings, though we have no clue what created them, or why. There are rumors of tall, pale non-humans with blonde hair in the mid-20th century, but no images, and the running assumption is that those would just be the same species, wearing some sort of disguise. As far as I know, there are no other known non-humans. And number 3, I don't plan to, but that's your choice. What should we look out for in the near future that, if it does happen, would confirm the things that you're talking about? Anything specific? Something that would confirm that this is not a LARP? I have to be careful here. I would make 2 general notes. Number 1, do you follow the David story? Nothing he said so far is inaccurate. I consider David a trial balloon. Virtually everyone I work with is just waiting to see if he gets struck by lightning, or his children get sick, or the government suddenly discovers that he's a criminal. If he survives this, then trust me, there will be a proliferation of information coming out over the summer. Number 2, pay attention to China, particularly mining. Be me, walking home after night shift and deli work 2 decades back, about to hit the dude weep vape to ease the muscle pain from working 11 hours at a flagship store in the deli on a chicken special day that is ridiculously low price with 2 callouts. Look to house across the street from mine as something anomalous flies towards it. A weird red, green, silver orb that isn't physical but seemingly energy-based. It looked like bright water, though moved insanely rapidly internally and externally. It sped towards the house, and I didn't get a good memory engram as my brain had no point of reference to understand its structure. This fucked up color ball blasts the house with green light, starts sprinting towards the light, and I pull out my camera, while I'm also using the phone app to tell my brothers that are walking home from 7-Eleven at that moment to look to the sky. They were still behind the tree line and couldn't see it. It flies off as my camera comes online. Next week, neighbors complain about demons or some shit, and they move out. I didn't say anything, as I can't even describe what I saw occurring over their house. I have never seen anyone talk about this online, but here I go. Be me, messing around on Minecraft 10 years ago on PC. Finally switched to Java Edition after months of playing Pocket Edition on my phone like a poor friend. Killed skeletons and monsters. Decided to make every wolf I encountered my dog. Traveling through the taiga, decided to build a makeshift house for me and my pack. Worried monsters would attack them. I'm not used to PC gameplay. Building like a madman before sunset, but something weird happened. Blocks I set down suddenly shrunk to 1/8 their size, like witchcraft or some shit. Panicked, ran out of dirt and wood faster than expected. Had enough materials for a big shelter, but the sun was going down. One of my dogs leaped out before I finished. Couldn't muster the courage to get them back in. Stuck inside, waiting in horror for daylight, hoping they would be safe. Never happened again. Thought it was some messed up game feature. Tried searching for info. Couldn't find anything about it. It felt like a witch played a cool trick on me, but there's no proof. Or you just dropped the item from your fucking inventory, dude. When I was about 11 years old, my uncle took me and my little cousin on a hunting trip in the Shawnee Forest, which is where I grew up, considering my dad thought it was necessary to build 20 miles away from any sign of civilization. It was deer season, and up until then, I never shot an animal before, so it was exciting as well as a bit scary. I got my boots on, and my uncle made sure we put on extra deer piss because, well, he thought it was funny. We set out at about 3:30 in the morning, still dark out, and the trees making the forest pitch black did not help my active imagination at the time. We set up 2 deer stands, one for me, because I bitched about having my cousin on my lap, and one for my uncle, with my cousin sitting on his lap, barely holding the gun. My uncle had no faith in me, and said it might be better if we set the deer stands a bit farther apart than usual. He thought I would scare away the deer by talking. So, I was in this stand, by myself, in the dark as fuck woods. When 4:30 a.m. rolled around, I finally had enough of waiting. I was impatient, and I climbed down off of the stand and started walking deeper into the forest. Now, it was starting to light up. I didn't worry too much about what I could find, considering I had a gun with me. I walked a good half-mile until I came up on a clearing. All I saw was some tall grass and a pile of leaves in the center of the flat. I walked around the edge of the clearing, trying to see if there was any running streams I could follow, so I might find some shit to kill, when I noticed that it was a bit odd for a pile of leaves to be out here in the middle of nowhere. I took a closer look at the pile from afar, noticing that it seemed lopsided. I took a few steps towards the pile, and I heard a sound that I could only describe as someone gurgling snot. Then, this massive fucking creature rose out of the pile, like fucking 8 or 9 feet tall. It looked like some fucking Neanderthal with hair covering about every place on his body, except the face. Of course, when I saw this fucking colossal beast, I shit my pants. I started freaking out, breathing increased, heart rate 2,000 beats a second, eyes bigger than an anime. I fucking booked it and ran as fast as my legs could carry me, all the way to my deer stand. I looked behind me, and this fucker was following me. Even more the reason to run faster than Usain Bolt. I got to my stand and climbed all the way to the top in about 3 seconds. I didn't sit down, fuck that. I stood on the stand and looked down to find a Bigfoot, but was nowhere to be seen. Either they gave up following me, or it was hiding. Either way, I was not going down to the forest floor without at least an AR on standby. I probably waited in a stand for a good hour. It was around 6 when my uncle showed up with my cousin and said it was time we start heading back. I, of course, told him what happened. "Kirk, I saw a big hairy creature down there. That's why we're hunting deer, Anon. You're supposed to shoot them. But this wasn't a deer. It was like a Bigfoot." "Well, sure, buddy." And that was it for my argument. I came down, looked everywhere, and tried to see if that fucking thing was waiting somewhere. We started to head back, and on the way, my uncle said he had to take a leak, and he left his gun and my little cousin with me. It was about 5 minutes, way longer than it should have been, when my uncle comes back, white as fucking snow. "What's wrong, Kirk?" Let's get out of here." I never gave it any more thought. Growing up, I figured I just imagined the whole thing, but I recently asked my uncle about the old times, and when I bring up the hunting trip, he got that same look on his face the morning of the hunt, when he came back from taking a piss. The rest of this was my uncle's account. So, when I left Connor with you, I walked over the roadbed and down the hill to take a quick piss. When I found a place out of your guys' sight, I saw a deer down the hill. I was going to run up and get my gun from you so we don't show up empty-handed, but just as I was about to leave, I see this big ass hairy man, like the one you described, and it ran up to this thing and fucking tackled it. I was looking from behind a tree about 30 yards away, and this thing grabbed the poor deer by its antlers and thrashed its head till even I could hear the neck shatter. The thing started to drag it by its hind legs deeper into the forest, the same direction that I found the thing. After that, I asked my uncle something else, and he was clearly not enjoying telling me this story. So, we had a few beers, and I started to drive home. I now live in Carbondale, which is a college town, about 2 hours from my uncle's house. I lived in the forest originally about 15 minutes away from his house, so, naturally, I stopped at the old house on my way home, and decided to go and poke around in the outer part of the woods, just remembering the good times I had, climbing them when I was a kid. Then, I shit you not, I heard the most spine-chilling scream I have ever heard in my life. It sounded like a man, but it didn't sound afraid. I got in my car, and I have never set foot in the woods again. Please post your genuine personal experiences of the occult, entities, paranormal, etc. Here's mine. The most impactful dream was of a memory where the family had attended a musical recital in London. The dream's details varied from the memory and the connection, with feelings remembered. The difference was meeting a red-headed girl of the same age, or older, in one of the building's hallways. I sensed an aura or presence from this girl that I've never felt again to date, either awake or asleep. I noticed her from a distance. Something about her caught my attention, and it mesmerized me. At this point, my attention and dream had shifted to her. The other actors, children, and adults all waited at the edges. The hallway imperceptibly shifted to allow the actors to surround us. The children huddled close, looks of expectation and curiosity shared among them. The adults formed two outer lines, spread out against either wall like ageless, experienced statues, who watched without emotions. I was shifted to a crouched position from where she approached me, appearing to grow with each step, as an aura of age and maturity emanated from her for a few seconds, but gave way to warm, welcoming, and childlike aura. I was slightly hesitant and resisted the changed aura or feelings only experienced within a dream, and after a short time, I non-physically embraced with this aura, which led to another wave of new feelings, a calmness that creeped through my conscience, an outside influence of joy, elation, and other emotions that I rarely felt as a child. This memory has served as some comfort, strength, and a reminder that no matter how shit things are, humans are capable of this bliss. There's some woods we call the Deaf Woods because it's owned by the retard school. Me and the boys used to dig around there all summer. One day, my bud and I got lost somehow, and we found a tree that had a pentagram root, and it was covered in dried blood. All the trees around it, for a few hundred feet or so, were withered and dying. The sun was starting to set, so we hurried to find a path. Then, a little girl's voice started crying out for help. We looked around, but it then came from different directions. My buddy freaked out and started blindly running through the woods. I tried to get him to come back, but he was out of it. So, I used the sun to figure out basic directions, and I eventually got out of the woods as it was getting dark. I jumped in the car and started driving around the perimeter, but he didn't answer his phone. I found him screaming bloody murder, hanging from barbed wire with 3 claw marks all over his body. He never told me what happened, and we never went back to those woods. A few days after that, I got the boys together, and we looked for that altar spot, and to this day, I have never found it. It's weird you mentioned a retard school because that's more or less the same as the ones where I live. There's a retard school, or it was for decades. Then the section of woods that they own, then a section of the woods that are public land, and then there's a section of private woods that belong to this big old mansion. It's really weird because they're all the same woods. There's no fences or nothing separating each part that's owned by whoever. Only had 2 real meme experiences there myself. First, go to the place when I was about 11 or 12. Hang out with older people who are 13 to 15, and I have been there a bunch of times. Play Relivo. Me and kid more my age, who also hasn't been there before, just follow older lad because he knows his way around. Massive storm a few nights earlier, and lots of trees have been uprooted. See this part where some tree looks like it's smashed through the ground. So, it's just a load of ivy, for example, with a big hole in it. Go investigate. Climb in the hole. It's like an underground room, but there's not much in it except for pieces of paper strewn around, and roof tiles everywhere from where the tree broke through. See pile of sandstones that look like they've been disturbed. There's blood all over them. Panic and climb the tree back out to escape. Didn't seem to be any door, so we weren't sure how anyone else usually got in or out of there. I looked for that same place off and on for years, and never once found it again. It spooked me though. The second time was worse, or spookier at least, but I've shared that one before. 7 years old, family moves to rental house, lived there for about a year. One night, awake way past bedtime, sitting up on side of the bed for some reason. Look on the wall next to head of the bed. Through the wall comes a humanoid goat face, like Homer disappearing into the bushes, but reversed. Don't remember it saying or doing anything, then just appearing and sitting there. Years later, as adults, tell my older sister about it. Says at that house, she had constant nightmares that the devil lived in her closet. Her closet was directly on the other side of that wall, under the stairs, between our rooms. I have several. The first one is not really something I remember, but I'm told that, as a baby, there was a period of time where I would cry non-stop all night. Every night, if I was left alone in my crib. As in, abnormal levels, even for a baby. I don't know, maybe it was nothing, or maybe it was Azazel feeding me demon blood. I also remember back at my old apartment, late at night, I'd often hear sounds from the apartment above, which was supposed to be empty. For literal years, it was always either someone pushing heavy furniture, or the sound of a marble that would fall on the floor directly above my head, independently of where I was in the room. I have also experienced more mundane stuff, like hearing a familiar voice calling me, like my mother, then finding that there's no one there when I go to look. This one time, I heard a voice right behind me whistling a little Star Wars tune into my ear as I was playing Battlefront 2. I turned around, and I saw no one. The one that puzzles me the most is the one time where I was in bed, and I masturbated, and to my shame, I fell asleep afterward. I didn't get up to clean myself immediately, I was drowsy, and I just said to myself, in 2 minutes. But no, despite being obviously unconscious when I fell asleep, I am certain that I lost consciousness, pants down, cock in hand, and finished on my stomach. Yet, when I next woke up, I'm under the covers, I have the coziest, most comfy feeling, and I'm clean. The covers are pristine, like the bed is perfectly made. I'm just in it under the covers. I literally feel like the A's put me to sleep, scavenged my cum, and then put me back with this one. I think I even forgot about this memory, whatever it is, for some time, before it came back. Aliens took my cummies before tucking me in so I can get sweet, sweet night-nights. Entity experience. 1995, approximately. 5-year-old me playing hide-and-seek in my basement with my brother and sister, hiding under a clothing rack my parents use for winter clothing. No one can find me, and the basement light goes off. Climb out, and see an entity at the basement steps. It's just a white outline of a human shape. Think a chalk outline of a body, but it's standing. Lights are blinking where its hands are, and it's changing color. Don't feel scared at all. Don't remember what happened afterwards. UFO experience. Walking home from hospital on clear summer evening. Sky is a pale blue with moon, and some stars starting to show, even though it's still light out. See a satellite moving across the sky slowly. It stops. It starts moving in another direction, slowly at first, then accelerates and disappears. It was moving as fast or faster than a shooting star. Sleep paralysis experience. 19 years old. Year is 2009. Friend is into meditation and other weird shit. Tells me to do breathing exercises while I lay in bed, follow his instructions, and feel my body fall asleep, but my mind is still awake. See weird shit like if you press into your eyes really hard. Eventually, I fall asleep. I wake up, and I cannot move. Sense a presence that wants me to go back to sleep. Vision narrows. Shake my head, and I hit the wall. Wake up again in the same position. A dream within a dream. Still cannot move, and it's the same sensation. Managed to jerk head again and run out of bedroom. I realized later that I gave myself sleep paralysis that night, and I've had it ever since. Last time it happened, I heard whispering next to my pillow. Another time, it was growling above my bed. I've seen multiple robed entities at various stages of my life. 16 or so, wake up alert, look around room, see a red figure. Probably a friend trying to spook me. Raise 22 at them to counter spook. Lifts robed arms and vanishes. Another, 20 or so, 3 days home from an uneventful trek in the military. Laying in bed watching ASMR. Roll over, see white robed entity with golden trim. Raises arms. Charred, human-like beings begin crawling around my room. No skin, no eyes. Dark red/brown appearance. Try to leave bed. Stopped by an invisible force. The whole night happens in 5 minutes. Figure disappears, and it's morning. I would question if it was a dream, but I never had a wake-up experience. I was perfectly cognitive the whole time. And lastly, 20 still, outside stargazing with roommate. Go to grab cigarette or something. We both see a black-robed figure with green eyes, looking at us from inside. Figure turns and walks away. Roommate says that's the 3rd time he's seen it since living here. Have approximately 6 more roommates over the next 2 years. 3 of the 6 report sightings of a black-robed figure with green eyes, watching them. If it weren't for a girl that had only stayed here one night mentioning the figure, I would assume she'd heard stories and was making it up. But she was new to the area, and new to the friend group. She only told one person that she saw it, and I happened to overhear that conversation. Those are the specter-like entities I've experienced, firsthand. I've had other weird occurrences, but nothing as concrete or real as those. I've got a paranormal story. Be me. First officer for Frontier Airlines, flying Denver International to IAH in Houston. On final approach to Houston, see blips popping up on TCAS and disappearing. Too far and high to cause any real concern. An airport is on site, so I just ignore it. Look about 55 degrees to my left and see 3 lights dancing high in the sky, moving crosswind and erratically. Captain sees them too. Both of us are like, what the fuck? Upon landing, we hear a United plane also landing mention it, or ATC. We did so as well and filed a report with FAA. Talking with other pilots later on, and they all have a similar story. My first ever UFO sighting as a pilot freaked me out well since absolutely no one, not even controllers, had any explanation. What kind of stories does IHA have? In terms of personal stories, I have ones about ground radios just being static, with what sounded like whispering. Also, if you've ever been down to those underground tunnels with the tram, it's legit a liminal space, and it always feels like someone's watching you. Also, strange military action going on really close to civilian airspace, which isn't too paranormal, just annoying. This might seem like a retarded question, but what exactly does a tinfoil hat do, and how does it work? Makes fun of retards who believe in every conspiracy out there, and tries to make fun of even the legit ones when the FBI agent is desperate to paint a bad picture about someone. Even the words conspiracy theorists were first used by feds to dismiss actual theories. about things they were doing. Either way, tinfoil does negate certain types of frequencies, and it's used as blocking material for those frequencies. To make it look less retarded, why not have it as a layer under the hood of a beanie? Probably depends on the level of crazy, but I think the basic idea is the same as Faraday cage. Basically, a simple metal enclosure. Doesn't even have to be totally closed. It can be a wire mesh, for example. It completely cancels out all electromagnetic fields in the interior, or at least up to a point where the material breaks down. So, I guess the idea is to protect your brain from harmful waves, or mind control or whatever. Of course, the major problem here is that waves could still come up from the bottom since the hat usually doesn't go all the way around. Or maybe the person believes it acts as an antenna or something. I don't know. Like I said, it probably depends. Most metals have the ability to block electromagnetic waves. Aluminum would work in theory from blocking your brain waves from being read by A's, and blocking other radiation from being transmitted into your brain. But it'd have to be pretty thick. Maybe like 1/8 to 1/4 inch minimum. Oh, you just know that the aliens told you, hey, our waves can't go through 1/4 inch of fucking aluminum foil. So don't be shysty and get the big roll of Reynolds next time, bros. Hell yeah, CIA spends millions on fucking mind control, MK Ultra and shit, but god damn it. Foiled again by Walmart brand aluminum foil. Hi X. I used 4chan frequently many years ago, and basically would hang out exclusively on the random page. I knew about the other boards here, obviously, but I just never really took the time to explore them. I drove constantly for work and listened to numerous podcasts, to audiobooks and other YouTubers whilst working the many hours I do. I have always loved horror, paranormal, and UFO and alien subjects since childhood, primarily ever since I witnessed a mass UFO sighting as a kid. I don't want to get into the sighting right now, as that's not why I'm here. I have recently started listening to a handful of YouTubers that delve into dark internet stories that unfold on various sites, but for the most part, it's either on 4chan or Reddit. I've never really posted on 4chan or Reddit, but I have lurked for a long time, mostly just as filler for times when I'm bored. I have traveled over much of the US and had a lot of weird experiences all over, and I have only ever really shared some of these experiences with my close, lifelong friends that I've had, to which they've pretty much just smiled and nodded along, but I could see deep down that they probably thought I was just full of shit. It's never really occurred to me to share here until today, after listening to a story of a young man who was able to share his story with repressed memories to this board, and while there wasn't much conclusion, he seemed to have found acceptance, or suspended disbelief, enough to find some answers for himself. So, here I am. I haven't drank alcohol in years, and I haven't smoked marijuana for almost a year now. I say this because, in order to work up the courage for this post, I picked up a nice bottle of whiskey, and I'm almost halfway through it, and trying to proceed coherently. In 2012, I worked roadside assistance, changing tires, getting into cars with keys locked inside, delivering gas to people who were stranded, and jump-starting vehicles and etc. I live in a desert state that borders Mexico, and while on call one night, this tale unfolded. I worked overnights basically 7 days a week, and I was the only driver from my company that was dedicated to night shift. I was basically on call for multiple cities, and the only time another driver would be called in at night is if I was called out, or that I was so overwhelmed with a busy night that the wait times were too excessive for the insurance companies that contracted us. One night, I received a call for a customer who ran out of gas, and multiple other companies denied the call prior to mine, and when my dispatcher sent it over, she basically told me that it was extremely far out of our way, and that we were only accepting the call because it was so incredibly dead that night in terms of work that was coming in. If I remember right, I had maybe 1 or 2 calls at the start of my shift around 7 p.m., and none others until this point, which was around 3 in the morning. I was actually at home because it was so slow, playing a game on my PC at the time, practically expecting work to be silent for the remainder of the night. I stopped at a gas station on the way, filled up 2-gallon gas jugs, and continued to the location. Now, most calls we received were associated with a specific address, a business location, or nearest off-ramp/mile marker to the customer in order to locate them. This request was simply coordinates, as it was pretty far into the desert away from the cities that I predominantly drove around night to night. So, as I made my way to the location provided, I called the customer on their cell phone to get more details on how to reach them, because, after a certain point, my GPS no longer had any roads to mark, and their coordinates appeared as a pin in the middle of nowhere, miles from any stretch of road that the GPS could identify. Keep in mind, at this time, smartphones were pretty lackluster in comparison to how good they are now, but I was using an Android with Google Maps, if you're wondering. Google Maps fucking suck. The customer answered, and the call was very distorted due to poor reception. I spoke with the customer for several minutes. The majority of the length of the call was me asking them to repeat what they were saying, again and again, as the distortion was that awful. After diligently taking notes on my notepad, I worked out with them essentially what dirt roads to take and what landmarks to keep an eye out for, and I set on my way to locate them. Along the way to the location, my service had essentially cut out entirely, but I had their instructions and I could still reference the map on my phone and try to figure out where I was, relative to where I was headed. Sorry if this is long, I'm kind of replaying this in my mind as I go, and the CAPTCHA is a huge pain in the dick for me right now. I believed I was extremely lost as I pressed on, and landmarks were practically impossible to look out for, as the darkness and the desert here was only illuminated by the moon and my headlights, which, quite frankly, polluted any distant illumination that the moon may have provided. But finally, after a lengthy drive out to the area that they were stranded at, and way too long searching for them up and down dirt roads, I saw hazard lights nearby, and finally, I reached the customer. I admit by this point that I was honestly pretty pissed off that I had been ripped away from my paid night at home gaming to get lost in the fucking desert. But I put on my best customer service act and smiled as I got out of my truck and approached the vehicle, with my trusty mag light in hand. The driver's door opened as I approached, and an extremely distraught woman, with puffy eyes and snot from sobbing over her situation, got out of the car. She practically ran towards me, and I half expected her to wrap her arms around me, as she and I reached each other. Instead, she hunched over and gripped her knees to let out some more tears. I suppose out of joy that she was no longer alone, and the predicament she found herself in was now coming to a close. She was probably late 30s to early 40s in age, had a very corporate look to her. She was dressed in a long skirt that hugged her legs and a button-up shirt, short heels, and was covered in dirt from the area. And she explained as I walked back to my truck to go into the gas cans, that she had to walk quite a ways away to a nearby rocky hill, riddled with cacti and dead brush, to get just enough reception to even call her insurance, long enough to get help sent her way. Apparently, she had been there since shortly after midnight, and again, it was around 3 a.m. that I had left my house to set out to her. Anyway, I began filling her car with gas, and it was good that I had brought a filled second gas container because I doubt the 2 gallons from just one of them would have been enough to get her to the nearest gas station. At this point, it was probably around 4:30-ish a.m., and the early stages of dark blue began to fill the sky as daylight approached. We, of course, had small talk as I filled her gas tank, and obviously, I was curious why in the hell she was out here at all. She proceeded to tell me that she works in the area, and normally leaves during daylight hours, but work dragged on that day, and as she left work in the darkness of the night, she apparently realized right away that she had made the mistake of not filling her tank earlier that day, and thus, here we are. The thing is though, there was nothing in the area that I was aware of, and this chick looked like she was dressed to work in an office, likely in a position of management or something. As I probed for answers as politely as I could, she kept giving me vague answers as to what she did for work and why she was out there. She did, however, make some comments that stuck with me at the time. She begged me to make sure that, as we drove from the area, that I stay close, so she can follow my truck and her car back to civilization. And she said flat out that it was not safe to venture off the dirt roads or make a wrong turn. I reassured her, and I got in my truck to leave. So, away we went. I was driving my work truck and doing my very best to backtrack the route that I took to find her, and she tailed along behind me in her car. We had been driving for maybe 10 minutes or so through winding desert trails that looked more appropriate for quads or dirt bikes than anything else, when she began frantically honking and turned on her brights in my rear view. The sky was a bit lighter now, but still a dark blue overhead. But off in the distance, as the sun approached the horizon, the sky got lighter and lighter, but headlights were still helpful, albeit not 100% required at this point. Anyway, I looked in my rear view, and instead of just seeing her headlights and car, I saw the silhouette of something in the bed of my pickup, and its dark form was surrounded by the brights of her headlights, and she was honking over and over. The shape or figure in the bed of my truck completely took me off guard, and I not only slammed on my brakes, but I about shit my pants, as it was completely out of place, considering where we were. As I hit the brakes, this humanoid-shaped thing braced itself against the roof of my truck cab, and in this instant, I saw long arms reach out abruptly to catch itself, and they just were not human. With her brakes at the rear, my truck skidding to a halt in the loose dirt, and the thud of its hands bracing for the stop on the roof of my truck, I saw this long-armed, long-legged humanoid effortlessly roll over the top of my truck cab as I came to a complete stop, and I watched her car skid to a halt as well, as she nearly rear-ended me. Not a sound was made as this thing went over the roof of my truck. No metallic groan as it collided with the hood of my truck, and in fact, it seemed to simply glide over the windshield and hood and land on the ground before my vehicle. And as quickly as its long legs caught itself on the ground, it almost instantly ducked beneath the view from my windshield in front of the grill of my truck. My heart was beating out of my chest, and my first instinct was to gun the vehicle and run over whatever it was that just landed in front of the truck. But I hesitated, and in just mere seconds of all of this, the somewhat timid-looking, nerdy corporate gal in the vehicle behind me flung open the driver's side door and pointed a handgun forward and quickly raced towards the back of my truck. She ducked briefly to look underneath it and popped back up as I opened my own driver's side door to join her. Honestly, I was in disbelief over what I saw and trying to rationalize it in my mind over the few seconds that passed. And just as soon as I began to open my door, she barked at me with a completely different demeanor to stay in the fucking truck, and she circled my vehicle with her gun, both with an air of urgency, but at the same time, as though this was not something that she was unfamiliar with. She grabbed my passenger door handle and pulled, but the door was locked. I leaned over and popped the lock on the passenger door, as they were just manual locks, and I didn't have a button to control them. When I did, she popped the door open, and I shit you not, she slapped a rosary on the seat, and then slapped the door closed again. She circled around the back of my truck to the driver's side once more, all while peeking under the vehicle as she did so. My driver's side window was down, and she told me to put the rosary around my neck, and I looked at her like perhaps she was crazy in that moment, because quite frankly I am an atheist, or at least I was. She snapped at me as I gave her a bewildered look and told me again to put it the fuck on. I grabbed it and did so, and honestly, in that moment, I wondered to myself if I was on some stupid prank show for the Sci-Fi Channel, or something. I put the rosary around my neck and felt both ridiculous and confused at the same time, watching her as if now she was the one at this point rescuing me. After she seemed satisfied that whatever we'd just encountered was gone, she told me we needed to get moving again and that the sun's almost up, and it is likely not coming back. She stated this confidently and told me to keep the rosary on until we reached the main road. about 20 or so minutes away. She returned to her car, followed me in my work truck back to the main road, and as we approached it, her vehicle's grille lit up red and blue, like that of an unmarked police vehicle, and I pulled over. She approached my truck, asked for the rosary bag, and she gave me a wad of cash, all hundreds. She told me not to come back to the area again, and said that I should invite God into my life. I asked her if this was a joke, and for an explanation, and she simply told me that, without the full armor of God, it may seek me beyond its territory. When I asked her what it was, she told me to simply go home and count my blessings. After this encounter, I started to drive back home. I stopped at an IHOP and drank several cups of coffee, while trying to convince myself that I'm not crazy, and furthermore, Googling over and over descriptions to the best of my ability on what I had witnessed, but to little avail. Several days later, I tried to call her again, as I had her number still sitting in my phone history, and, of course, all I got from it was an automated voice on the other, telling me that the number was not in service. I have fantasized about going back to the area. I've told a few of my close friends about the situation and, unsurprisingly, they acted polite about it, but still only made me feel like they thought I was fucking with them, or possibly batshit insane if I actually believed it. I've never really brought it up again since then, other than to tell my ex-wife about it while we were still married, and she acted about the same. Also, someone asked him what his favorite channels are, or some of the channels that he listens to, and he fucking said Maverick Files, let's go. We made it. We're famous. I normally don't do this. Actually, I don't think I've ever done this. But someone on Twitter sent me a picture of their dog. His name is Django. Look how fucking cute it is. You all have a great night.